Good morning, good morning, good morning, and good morning. And welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket is the clash of the titans and its impact on the social construct of Africa, and how the old Western media negative narrative and stereotypical narrative of Africa is clashing with the new social media of live streaming by citizenship journalism, who have taken their own stories and narratives into their own hands without any media censorship from these big media outlets. And our fellows, this brings about the story of this 21-year-old African American from Ohio, Cincinnati, Darren Watkins, popularly known as IShowSpeed, who just completed his 28-day African tour, where he basically debunked this old negative stereotypical aspect of Africa by showing the great culture and beauty of the African continent to his followers. I mean, this dude has over 50 million subscribers to his live streaming channel. And he has very young people who listen and watch him while he live streams all across the world. And he has pretty much debunked this negative, stereotypical mindset that has been perpetuated by Western media as well as Asian media and Middle Eastern media and pretty much all the media of the world, where everything they talk about Africa has to be negative. But fellas, before I dive into this subject today, I came across a young American dude, also a very young dude, I think also in his early 20s, who posted a video about the impacts that IShowSpeed has pretty much created in America and to his young followers all over the world. And I would like you guys to watch this clip. And then when we come back, I'll also give you my opinion of what pretty much is going on and what this dude has done for the continent of Africa. Something that leaders of Africa have not been able to do. But he's been able to use this African tour to debunk all that negative, stereotypical narrative that these old Western and Asian media outlets have perpetuated about Black folks on the continent of Africa. So, fellas, let's go ahead and watch this clip. And when we come back, I will also give you my opinion and perspective on what is going on. So let's go ahead and hear what this young dude, I mean, this dude summarized it the best. I mean, he summarized it the best. I don't know what to say about how he summarized this thing. He summarized it too good. And you cannot go wrong with that. He summarized it real good. Yeah, here we go.
Speaking as somebody who grew up swallowing the same bullshit stories everybody else who was not African did, and finally watched them fall apart in real time, because that's exactly what's happening right now. What IShowSpeed is doing in Africa is not just travel content. It's not just entertainment. It's not just a streamer having fun. It is exposure. It is exposure. For centuries, Western media worked overtime to make Africa look like one thing and one thing only: poor, broken, dangerous, backward, underdeveloped, starving, hopeless. No nuance, no humanity, no joy, no modern cities, no culture beyond suffering. Just the same tired images recycled over and over until people stopped questioning them. Those images were not accidental. They were literally useful. They were useful because when you brainwash and convince the world that a place is nothing but chaos, you don't have to respect it. You don't have to invest in it. You don't have to learn from it. You don't have to treat its people like equals. Now enter a young Black black kid from Cincinnati, Ohio, with a phone, a camera, a crew, and a live stream. No script, no media filter, no permission. And suddenly, the story cracks. He lands in South Africa, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Angola, Kenya, Rwanda, and what happens? Not what we were told would happen. He's welcomed, he's protected, he's fed, he's celebrated. Artists give him their work, kids chant his name, vendors hand him real food, real warmth, real generosity. City after city, border after border. Welcome home. And yeah, people will say, well, he's famous. Okay, then explain why that same fame did not protect him everywhere else. Because in parts of Europe and Asia, where he's just as known, he was met with racial slurs, monkey noises, bananas thrown at him. That did not come from nowhere. But on the African continent, he's treated like family. And that's why this matters more than people realize, because his audience is young. Millions of kids who only knew Africa through disaster headlines and distorted history lessons and brainwashing and false narratives, now they're watching a live stream that does not match the lie. They're watching joy, modern cities, music, style, food, love, pride, safety, community. They're watching respect. And when a 15 or 16-year-old black kid in America, or just any kid in America who's been told their whole life that Africa has no food, no water, or there's nothing there, they just live in stick huts, watches Speed eating local food, laughing, being embraced, something shifts. Maybe Africa isn't a struggle. Maybe Africa is not a warning. Maybe Africa is not a charity case. Maybe Africa is connection. Maybe Africa is opportunity. Maybe Africa is home. And that realization is dangerous, not to people, but to a narrative, a long-running story that kept Africans in the diaspora disconnected from the continent, disconnected from culture, disconnected from possibility, disconnected from each other. Once people see the truth, the old script stops working.
Well, two young entrepreneurs.
All right, fellas.
Passions.
All right, fellas. So you basically heard this young dude. I mean, kudos to this young American who pretty much have been following IShowSpeed on his African tour. And this young American dude pretty much summarized how the media narrative in the Western world have also contributed to the negative stereotypical nonsense that all these young folks and people in these countries in America, Europe, and Asia perpetuate about Africa in terms of poverty, people dying of hunger, malnutrition, and so on and so forth. So he pretty much summarized everything for people to see that what IShowSpeed has done has debunked all that negative narrative. Something that 54 African country governments couldn't do. This young 21-year-old African American from Cincinnati, Ohio, has been able to do with his African tour. Especially, the most important thing about it is that he's doing it with young followers. So basically changing the mindset and the negative narrative that have been perpetuated on these young folks in America and around the world. Now you have a young, ordinary folk. I mean, you're not talking about anybody scripted, like he said. I mean, young, ordinary folk that people can relate to. Now him sharing his own story and narrative about the places that he has visited on the continent. It is unfortunate, fellows, but that's the reality. That's the truth. This young American dude spoke exactly how the news media in the Western world and Asia and some part of Middle East have all connived and played a key role in the negative narrative of the African continent. And I will even go further, because fellows, it's not even just the news media. Living in the United States of America, where you have this United Nations food for programs and NGOs that pretty much solicit money from American citizens, and they send out all these ads, I mean, either through the mail or on television. And everything that they show, because they are soliciting funds from their people in America, they have to show poor African kid with a pot or a bowl, hungry, looking for food. Because they send out this mail with pictures of black kids holding a bowl, empty bowl. So pretty much saying that, oh, these kids are hungry and please help us, give us some donation and so that we can support these kids on the African continent. And they show these same ads also on TV. I mean, this is the reality, fellows. This is the truth. You come on to America or the Western world, and most of these NGOs, their ads that they do on TV, what do? They portray Black African kids in hunger or malnutrition, so that they can be more or less like they get sympathized from these donors who will contribute for them to use that money to go and feed these African kids. And that picture that is portrayed in their ads, either through the mail or on TV, also creates a negative mindset about the African citizens on the African continent. I mean, look, I've met African Americans, young Black folk, African Americans, young in their 20s. About somewhere last year when we were talking, and I asked this dude that you always going to the Caribbean and other parts of the world, why don't you also go and visit Africa? And I was baffled and shocked. To my surprise, what these two dudes told me was that, oh man, every time we see on TV, we always see about the African kids of poverty, they're begging and they live in very horrible conditions. I said, hold on. So is that why you guys think that Africa is like that? That's why you don't even think about visiting Africa when you can go to other places and visit for vacation and stuff? And the guy told me yes, because they don't see anything better. And I was very surprised because I'm looking at these young dudes and I'm like, hold on, we have social media now, so you can see things for yourselves. So you don't have to feed into it. And he said, look, since I was a kid and I was watching Sesame Street and all these children programs, these are the ads that they've been putting on TV. So I've always had this mindset of Africa where these kids there are always suffering with poverty, malnutrition, and so on and so forth. I said, man, you know what you are saying is true, because these TV stuff, the ads that they show on this TV really plays a key role, and it does. And just like what the young dude said, just like what he said. So just imagine the number of Black American kids in America and Black kids in Europe and other parts of the world who come across these ads from these NGOs, from the United Nations Food Programs, where all they show is African kids either in desperate situations, hunger, malnutrition, and so on and so forth. So this forms the opinion of these kids in these developed countries. And this young dude just pretty much summarized everything. This dude did a great job of it. I mean, he pretty much gave the world exactly how these Western Asia, Middle Eastern, and other parts of the world media have always portrayed Africa, which is not true. Yes, Africa have its downsides. I mean, we have our own struggling and poverty, and so we get that. But every part of the world, every place in this world also has that. But you don't see them showcasing India. As a matter of fact, there are more poor people in India dying of hunger than on the continent of Africa. And we talk about 1.5 billion people on that continent, in that country of India. Go down to India and see the level of poverty down there. But you don't see the art portraying these Indians as malnutrition and begging and all that stuff. But they always portray Africa as the place or the capital of poverty in this world. It is very unfortunate, and I'm asking myself, China, Asia, talk about Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, all these countries in Southeastern Asia, they are not all that well off than Africa. They might be just a step in terms of development and just a step ahead of Africa. But in terms of the level of poverty, because of their population, a lot of these countries have more poverty than a lot of African countries. But even some of these people in these Asian countries even think they are way better than Africa. It is unfortunate because all of them, this is the reason why they all tend to believe in that stuff, because they also see the same acts. The same things that these American kids see here, they also see the same thing. And every time they talk about Africa, everything they talk about Africa is about negativity. Negativity. I mean, poverty, people dying of AIDS, people dying of diseases, people dying of hunger. That's all they show. That's all they show. And now you have a 21-year-old African American, 21-year-old, just takes a camera and live streams and shows the world the beautiful side of Africa. And now you have all these kids all over the world wondering how come that we were never told about how beautiful Africa is, because that's the narrative that have been perpetuated. And like the dude said, I mean, you might think this was, was not planned or done. I mean, I don't want to go that far to say that, but to some extent, going back years, this was the way to portray Africa, to create a division between the people, Africans in the diaspora and Africans on the continent. In some ways, yes, it was perpetuated, because if you look at, especially look at a Black American history and that of Africa, there's no doubt that there was a lot of programming to pretty much to delineate African Americans from Africa. And the best way to do that is to show Africa in that negative form. Other than that, what else are you going to do? I mean, for you to delineate somebody from somewhere, all you have to do is show them how negative that place is. So everybody sees Africa as, oh no, I don't want to be African. No, I don't want to be African, because you know what? Everything about Africa is negative. And that's unfortunate. And to some extent, you know what? I don't blame them too, because if you are in their shoes and this is all you see and this is all you've been told, then you fall into that trap to believe in everything that you've been told. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing that you see other than the negative aspect of Africa. But now the world has changed. So now you have a situation where now you have citizenship journalism, where young people live streaming travel to these places and they show the world what they see in themselves live, for you to believe it or not to believe it. No censorship. This is the real deal. And that is what they do. You know, and it's unfortunate also, whilst he was down in Africa, so there were some incidents that I saw a lot of people criticizing, especially when he went to Nigeria and Ghana, where there were some people on the streets asking for money, and people started criticizing the citizens, or those in Nigeria and as well as in Ghana, for asking for money. So I said, hold on. I mean, it is unfortunate, but that's part of a situation when you have your own leaders from your various African countries come to the United Nations, go to Japan, China, and the rest of the developed world, begging and asking for money. That's not that different from what they do, because they have no shame. So if they don't have respect for themselves, then of course, your citizens also, when they see the opportunity to ask somebody for money, they're going to beg. So I don't blame the citizens for that. Because if you live in a certain condition, especially in a very poor situation, when situations like this happen, people are going to ask for help. Just like our leaders from the continent travel all over to the world begging, asking for aid, food aid and all that stuff, when we have abundance of arable lands, but we are not able to cultivate and do anything out of it because of high level of corruption. But we go around the world begging leaders of America, Asia, Japan, China, you know, and at the end of the day, if the leaders of that on that continent have no shame and they can go around the world and beg, then why do you blame your citizens when people visit and they think that they can beg and get something from the people? I don't blame them. It is unfortunate. It's not supposed to be like that. But at the end of the day, that's the reality. It's not just even in Africa, because it happens even in America too. Because even if most of these celebrities go to some poor neighborhoods in the United States and people know about them and they're in the streets, you know, people ask them. I mean, there are people who beg on the streets in America. I mean, ordinary citizens, they ask for money. You know, it's all over the world. Everywhere in the world, it happens. But I had an issue with people always criticizing, you know, oh, the people in Africa were doing this in Africa. No, hold on. As far as you have the situation you have on that continent, this is how it's going to be. So I'm not going to fault citizens for going on the street and asking IShowSpeed for money or whatever. Because at the end of the day, that is what your leaders do. Your leaders have no shame themselves. They go to United Nations, they go to China, they go to America, they go to Europe, they go to Japan and also beg for money. So it's not that different. Because if your leaders can do, then there's nothing wrong with your citizens doing it. Because at the end of the day, like the old adage says, charity begins at home. And in the homes of that African continent, that is what the leaders of Africa do. And so it's unfortunate, fellows. It is very, very unfortunate, but that's the reality and that's the truth. Because at the end of the day, our leaders have created an environment where the citizens of their various African countries have to live in that horrible condition. It is sad for these young folks to see Africa through the lens of old Western, stereotypical, negative lens of Africa underdeveloped, poverty, and so on and so forth. But we have created that conditions ourselves because of bad governance and high level of corruption. Because at the end of the day, if you're looking at Africa as you see 2026, and you go back 30, 35, 40 years ago, countries like Nigeria were way better than China, India, Vietnam, and a lot of Southeastern Asian countries. Going back to the day of independence, Singapore was below the level of Ghana and Nigeria and a lot of African countries in the late 60s and early 70s. These are facts. The GDP of Ghana in the late 60s around independence was way better than that of Singapore. So how come? How come today most of those people in those areas think that they are way, way, way better than Africa because of bad governance, poor leadership, and high level of corruption? So it is unfortunate, fellas. It is sad, that when you have, especially young people in this Western world who have this perception of the level of poverty and suffering about Africans on the continent, and now for them to see their own young age, dude, going around live streaming and showing them the true culture and the beauty of Africa, which shouldn't be the case. By the end of the day, it is the case because our leaders, because of bad governance and high level of corruption, have also contributed to where we are today on that continent. Africa should never be where it is today, but we are where we are today because of bad leadership, high level of corruption, and bad governance. That's the unfortunate truth, fellas. That is the unfortunate truth. But hopefully, this is the beginning. When you have young folks with TV, video cameras and cell phone cameras going on tour on the continent and showcasing the beauty of that continent, hopefully, it's going to start to change the mindset of other young people, especially blacks in the diaspora in America and Asia and Europe and Asia, to now see Africa for what it is, as the real beginning of where mankind started everything from, rather than having this same old negative perception of the continent. It is unfortunate, fellas. It is unfortunate. But at the end of the day, for everything and for people to have trust on that continent, our leadership and our level of development also have to improve. Yes, IShowSpeed have done his part. He has taken out a lot of the negativity about Africa and is now portraying the positive aspects of Africa. But it's up to the African citizens themselves also and the leaders of Africa to take that and showcase the positive by helping Africa and creating an environment where their countries can become more developed and become better, so that people moving forward will see Africa through a different lens of development. All right, fellas, if it's Sunday, it's the Africa Weekly Talk. God bless you guys and have a great week. Thank you guys and peace and love. Let us see. Yeah. Oh.